Want to be sure you're getting the most out of your retirement for all the years of your retirement? That's the primary goal of More Living with Jim Brogan and our Dollars and Cents segment, where we provide you with an important financial tip that will help positively impact the quality of your life in retirement. And now here's Jim with this week's Dollars and Cents tip.
Do you need to have a living trust, or is a will sufficient to pass your life savings to your spouse and to your kids? Get asked this question all the time. Now, to clarify, when I talk about a trust, I'm talking about a revocable living trust. If you have an estate that is over $1.5 million or so in assets, in the state of Tennessee, you need some bypass trust type planning, which means a trust gets funded. Meaning, are we back on? There we go. Meaning a trust gets funded when one of the spouses pass away. Now, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about where you take your assets, you create a living trust, and oftentimes a living trust in the husband's name, a living trust in the wife's name, and you actually put your assets into the trust. Now, you don't put your IRAs in there. You can't do that, but you put your other assets into the living trust. The number one reason people do that, when I say, why do you have a living trust, is to bypass the probate process in Tennessee. Now, if I ask that question and I hear the answer is to save on taxes, living trusts typically don't save on the estate taxes. It's a great vehicle to bypass probate. Now, in Tennessee, probate is not a terribly difficult process. Okay, there are other states around the country where you definitely don't want to pass away with assets that would go through a probate process. Now, remember, when you jointly own an asset or you name a beneficiary, the asset does not go through probate. All right, but you can't do that with your house and with your property to your kids. I mean, you can't just put your kid's name on your property. We see people do that. That is not a permittable transaction in Tennessee. There's a gift tax limit ramifications in Tennessee and at the federal level. You're really not supposed to do that. There's limitations of how much you can do. You can do it, but you'd have to file some gift tax returns and pay gift tax in Tennessee. So a lot of people will put assets in a living trust so that they bypass the probate process, because we hear all these horror stories about probate. Probate in Tennessee is not terribly difficult. And now there are some great benefits to living trust, and bypassing probate does make it a private process for you and your family, and that is important. There are other benefits to living trust. One of the biggest benefits, if you have a larger estate particularly, is, if you become incapacitated, to change your will, you have to have the mental capacity to change your will. So if you ever lose that mental capacity, you can no longer change your will and adapt your estate plan. But if you have a living trust and you become incapacitated, you can change your plan through your successor trustee. There are a lot of benefits to that. The biggest thing, though, is in Tennessee, not everybody needs a living trust. Okay, and there are trust mills that go around and they give presentations and they basically sell trusts and they try to scare you half to death into doing a living trust. You don't necessarily need that. Don't be scared into doing a living trust. Okay, now if you have property in multiple states, that's another big reason you don't want to probate in multiple states. But the best way to get good legal advice on that is go to an attorney or an estate planner that believes, your plan. It depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. What are your goals? There's pros and cons to using a living trust. There's pros and cons to just doing it with your will. Talk to somebody who does it both ways and believes, the plan needs to be specific to your needs. So don't be sold into doing a living trust just out of fear.
And that's our Dollars and Cents segment for this week. You can find this week's Dollars and Cents segment and others by visiting BroganFinancial.com.